As a president of today's program, we have amongst us our beloved principal, Reverend Dr. Praveen Martis SJ, who doesn't need any introduction. He is well known for his knowledge and dedication. May I now request you, Father, to give your presidential remarks.
Good afternoon to all of you. Respected Dr. Rekha Ahuja, the resource person of the day, Miss Bhavya Bangera, the guest of honor, the NSS presidents, the secretaries, my dear NSS students. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon to attend this webinar. The topic is very interesting, being an empathetic listener. We must now realize the context in which we are all there. There's a time of a second wave of pandemic. The whole world is struggling, and much more our nation and our state and our region at this moment. We must ask a question at this moment: what is my role? How can I really alleviate the difficulties, the troubles that the people are facing at this moment? How can I become an empathetic listener? At St. Aloysius College, we have started St. Aloysius COVID Care Center. Through the center, we have been helping a lot of people of this region, so listening to them and counseling them, and also providing food kits and medical kits. And also, we have provided COVID Care Center to the frontline workers, the COVID warriors like the police personnel. Now, these are the works that we are continuing to have it. We are continuing to have at St. Aloysius College. At this moment, we felt that our students also should become very much part of this St. Aloysius COVID Care Center in terms of understanding the difficult situation and also how to become the empathetic listeners. This may be among themselves. I know that many of our students' families are struck by the COVID-19 and they are struggling. At the same time, many of our well-wishers, our stakeholders are also not well and struck by COVID-19. At this moment, how can we work together to really be with one another and part of these difficult times to support one another and give life to one another? I think this topic is very relevant, being an empathetic listener, as we need more and more time to listen to people. Why I'm saying this? Because our own media, the social media maybe, or the print and the national media that we listen to, all the time there's so much of negativity, so much of fear that is already feeding in the people's minds. How people can come out of their distress at this moment. Some of them are frightened because they listen to this TV or listen to the clippings and maybe reading something which is very negative and frightening. And some of them are infected and affected by COVID-19. How can we really understand and be with the people? First of all, we need to feel courage in ourselves. We need to have proper knowledge to understand what is happening and to support the COVID infected and affected families. I feel this is a very important time, and Dr. Rekha, the Assistant Director of Samagra, would definitely help us out to understand and how to understand the infected and the affected people, the people who are distressed, and be part of their families and be with them at this moment, at their most distressed moment of their lives, so that we can give new hope, new life into their families and their lives. So I thank Dr. Rekha for accepting our invitation, and also the NSS presidents for organizing this webinar at this moment to help our students. Also, I encourage our students to participate and engage themselves in this webinar so that they can help out their own families, their own friends, and the society at large. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Father, for your inspiring words. Now we have come to the most awaited moment, that is, the session on being an empathetic listener by the resource person, Dr. Rekha Ahuja. We'll be having a question answer session at the end of this webinar. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat box. We'll have time for the questions at the end. May I now request Ms. Carol Pereira, NSS Program Officer, to introduce Dr. Rekha Ahuja to the participants.
Thank you, Swati. Respected dignitaries, organizers, and my dear NSS volunteers, good afternoon to you all. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Rekha Ahuja, who is going to talk to us on empathetic listening. She's eminent with good number of accomplishments, and time doesn't permit me to give you details of all her accomplishments. Let me just put it in a nutshell and give a brief introduction about today's resource person. Dr. Rekha Ahuja has a PhD in psychology with a specialization in psycho-oncology. Her interest and expertise are in the field of health psychology and qualitative research methods, among other areas such as client experiences in chronic health conditions, personal growth, psychosocial rehabilitation, and holistic health practices. She was formerly assistant professor in psychology at Christ, deemed to be university. During her tenure there, she was a member of cross-cultural research project on graduate attributes and training needs for clinical psychology students in India and USA in collaboration with Miami University. Now she is with St. Joseph's Evening College since 2019. She is currently the head of Department of Psychology and Counseling in St. Joseph's Evening College and is the assistant director of the Samagra Holistic Development and Wellness Center. Along with the decade-long experience in teaching and seeing clients for supportive therapy, she has also facilitated workshops and lectures on parenting skills, professional growth, personal growth, counseling skills for corporates, mental well-being, self-care, mentoring, and research methods. She has organized as well as attended training workshops on several psychological therapeutic interventions and research skills. She has presented papers and published articles in several reputed journals in the area of mental health, psychosocial rehabilitation, and cancer care. We are privileged to have a resource person who is having such vast experience in the field of psychology. May I now request Dr. Rekha to please start your session and enrich us with your thoughts. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Father. And thank you to all the organizers for having me here. It is also my privilege to be here to engage with you all and a very big, vibrant group of students as well as staff members and other people involved in the common cause of reaching out to people, as it was mentioned during this crisis of COVID. I would first like to extend my gratitude to Father Praveen Martis, the principal, then the organizers of this program, Madam Prima, for inviting me, for putting their trust that we could have a fruitful session. And also I want to acknowledge and thank my own college management and the Samagra team for extending their support and making it possible for us to do these programs. Thank you for your very kind introduction. And I will be very happy if I can engage with you and do some work like this. It is need of the hour, we feel. And from Samagra, as it was already mentioned, our team is working with all the different college units across Karnataka institutions. And we are trying to collaborate with all the mental health professionals, the counselors, and other volunteers so that we can do these kind of mental health awareness activities, training, and also we are offering online counseling and similar programs like what even your college is doing currently. So let us all take this up as a service that is all of us together in it. And this webinar, whatever I've put together, is in line with trying to help our volunteers as well as anybody who is attending to gain more insight into how we can effectively reach out and how we can demonstrate some of the skills like empathy and compassionate communication. With that, I think I will just share my screen and then we will begin. Feel free to stop me in between if you would like to clarify anything, or if you want me to explain something that you did not understand. I understand this is mostly a group of students that we have with us, mostly comprised with students. So please feel free. Ma'am, is it clear? Can I start, ma'am?
Screen is visible, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so as it was already introduced and we had a good background about why this topic is necessary and what we may cover in this. This is from the Samagra group. We are trying to provide some sort of mental health awareness, and this is one of the crucial topics we do for different groups of individuals, not just students, but it would be more relevant for people like you all, especially who are in the field directly encountering people and doing the work with people who are struggling and suffering. So I would like to start with this quote. When you talk about, I'm sorry, okay, yeah. When you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. This quote of His Holiness Dalai Lama is very relevant for our discussion today, and I thought it would be a good way for us to begin. Now, when you read this, the intention of listening should not be just to gather some information or just to respond or just to confirm what we already think or what we already know. It is to be able to learn something, to be able to see it from a new perspective, and to understand from another person's point of view. So, with that, let us understand the context. Now, we already know that as you know, okay, I will start with this point. The aim of all of us here, the volunteers especially, or the national scheme, service scheme itself, the aim is to reach out, to provide service, to provide support, to reach out on a community level, and particularly in a pandemic like this, and particularly the second wave, which has hit us really bad, really hard. So in that context, we would like to keep in mind what is the training and what is the overview in which we are trying to reach out. The values of our own Jesuit education, or the principles behind what we do in all of our institutions. That is, like, I think the person introducing in the beginning, she mentioned about forming men and women for others, and we all know that it's one of the core values we go by. We integrate this into all our education initiatives. So when we are forming men and women for others, what is it that we need to do? We need to have a compassionate approach. We need to have a collaborative approach. We need to understand, and we need to reach out. We need to listen. So again, it becomes important here. And here from Samagra, we always talk about the cura personalis, care for the whole person. It's not just talking to a person with the diagnosis of COVID, or not just talking to a person who does not have some needs. It is understanding the entire person in all aspects, whether it is their mental health, physical health, social well-being, and various aspects of our day-to-day life. The pandemic currently, we all know there is nothing much that I need to say. The kind of news we are seeing, the numbers, the kind of statistics that are telling us what is happening. And particularly in this second wave, we have all been affected directly or indirectly through people we know in our own families. And as was mentioned, we already have so many among our own institution people itself who are affected. So it is something that we have to be very sensitive about, and we also need to stand together and reach out and support one another. So when you talk about reaching out, and when you talk about going into the community, or even just talking to your friends, or your colleagues, your family members, your neighborhood people, anybody who may be affected, what is the expectation when we try to interact? What exactly is going on within us, or what are we already having as an assumption when we begin? Okay. what are our own expectations of the self? What are the expectations that we have? Are we thinking that we should go there and solve somebody's problem? Are we thinking that we must go there and have all the answers? Are we thinking that we should go there and just lend our presence or support by being around and sharing that difficult experience? What is it that we are reaching out for? Now, if it is something more specific, like doing a vaccination drive or doing something like, educating people about why they should wear mask and what are the hygiene practices, or the correct way of dealing with some symptoms, then our expectations are very focused and very specific. And we know that the goal is to tell people, or we have most of the answers. There are more factual things. But when we are also dealing with emotional aspects and psychological aspects, we may not know fully, or there won't be a right answer or a right way to do something. So sometimes there can be a mismatch in our expectations and the other person's expectations. So us plus the others. The goal of exploring these together or having some kind of an understanding together is for us to have a shared understanding. Shared understanding should be built upon collaboratively rather than one party assuming the other. See, sometimes when we go out, even with the intention to help people, or even from a counseling perspective, when I, talk about it, people would say, okay, you fix this, or you cure this, or you tell me a solution, or give me a medication for something. Okay. Not always we will have a very fixed solution. And what may work for one person may not work for another person. What expectations I might have may not be the same as what somebody else may have. So we need to always try and find this balance between creating a shared understanding with whoever we interact, whether as an individual we are meeting someone, or as a group we are meeting a group of individuals. um, Everyone is facing a common problem. Or when we set out, like, for example, now you want to reach out to all those who are affected by COVID, or all those who are displaced because of various natural calamities. The common problem is there, the experience that everybody knows. So everyone knows, okay, there must be some 10 people in my neighborhood who have got COVID. There may be some 15 people in our own institutions who are affected. That's a common one. But what is the unique experience of it? So for me, how do I go through it? For somebody else, how do they go through it? Maybe I'm a very sensitive person by nature, or maybe I have just lost somebody who was close to me, and so I'm already fearful that I have lost my some relative, and now another person has got COVID. What if they also don't make it? Or probably I'm scared because I'm the only breadwinner of the family, or maybe I'm not bothered because I don't care about life, or I don't have anything to worry about. So when you meet, when you engage, and especially in a community work, we do have a common problem or a common setting in which we are reaching out. But the unique experiences of each one, this is where we can make a difference by connecting with them, by listening to their stories, by making it more personalized and reaching out in a way that is best suited for them. So when you get to know the person and their context, we'll actually be focusing on what are they thinking, what are their fears, what are their misconceptions, what are their feelings.
Muted, ma'am. Your audio is mute, ma'am. It's not audible. Yes, now it is.
It says host has muted me. That's why I was trying to indicate like this, like something happened.
Okay, okay. Yes.
See, now I was saying getting to know the person and their context. What exactly are they thinking? What are their fears about the illness? What is their assumption? What is the kind of information they have? What have they been hearing even about maybe you reaching out to them? Maybe they know that, okay, there are a group of volunteers going around and talking to people. What do they know about you? What do they think about you? Do they see you as a helpful person? Do they see you as somebody who's intruding? Do they see you as a means to get some of their needs met? What exactly is happening? That should be, even in the short time that we get, I know that we are working in very tight schedule, so you may get 5 or 10 minutes or maximum half an hour to speak with somebody, but you can still try and get this clarity so that they feel understood and you also know what you're doing is meaningful. What are they expecting from you? Now, this is often not very clear or not very apparent, but you can always try and tell them that we are here to understand something, and make your intentions clear, and then ask them what is it that they may expect, so that a realistic collaboration can be established, so that they know, okay, you are here to identify what are their needs, and you will get back later, or you will refer them to some other source, or they know that you have only this much amount of time, or they know what is your training or where you are coming from, and likewise you know what they want and what is expected of that interaction, because in that short time, to maximize and make it most effective, it's good to speak, and sometimes we don't do that, we may hesitate to ask, but it's always better to ask them what is their expectations. Now, even though they may say something, what if the unexpected happens? Okay, so I'm not sure if I ask the audience to respond, would they be comfortable sharing? But if anybody wants to say, can you tell me something which was unexpected when you go out into the field and something happened where you were not prepared for it, but then you had to somehow deal with it on the spot? Can you mention anything like that? If it's okay to ask people, otherwise they can put it in the chat box or something, so that they can also think along with us as we are discussing. So what could be an unexpected situation? Oftentimes, especially like, for example, now the emotional aspects, we are very much emotional. So suddenly somebody comes and tells you something, okay, they want to find out what happened or how has your experience been. You may burst out crying, you may become uncontrollably upset, or you may start having some kind of fits, or some kind of different symptoms may start showing up. It can happen, right? So how do we plan for such things, and how do we prepare ourselves for such things? Okay, and even in the event of something happening where we did not imagine, what is the best way we can get support and get help, and that way be prepared. So emotional outburst is one, as I said. The first point here is the ambivalence. That means sometimes it's very vague. We talk to them, they also just want to, say something. The conversation is not very serious, or they just say in bits and pieces. They're not clear, or they don't want to explain much, or they may have, like now, for example, we are going talking to them in one particular language, but you are not fluent with it, or they are not fluent. So the expression may be limited, like that. So ambivalence and these kind of things can also impact. And then sometimes when we go to meet people, they feel that you should fix it all, or you should know the solution to everything. And if they are not willing to, or they get angry with you that, oh, you didn't tell me this, or you didn't help me, or you're not giving me money, or you're not giving me your mobile phone, or whatever it may be, they may react differently. So we must be prepared for these things. Now, reaching out effectively. Keep in mind you are meeting people who are vulnerable, especially in these times, and more so when you are interacting in a crisis situation like this. The vulnerability that people feel is very high. They are already scared. They are already maybe weak, or they are already fearful about losing someone. They may not trust people so easily, even to welcome you or to just interact with you. They may feel that there is a risk in contracting the virus or anything like that. So keep in mind that you are meeting someone who is already having all these things going on, or who is already dealing with so many things and emotionally challenged. For example, if you see, even in the animal world, when animals get threatened, what happens? Like if you see a cat, or if you see some other animals, they will immediately, the hair stands up, or they become very defensive. Similarly, it happens in us. It's just that our body doesn't show those kind of reactions, but internally this is how we are reacting. And our mind may have a lot of thoughts, like we may not trust, or we may be confused. We may be struggling with something that has just affected us. So remember that you are meeting people who are affected by the pandemic currently. So even if they had any means of doing something, they may not be able to go out, they may not have their job, they may not have good health, they must have also lost people close to them. They are dealing with challenges, especially the type of people we will be going out and dealing with and meeting would have a lack of resources and lack of social support sometimes, or emotionally they may not have the awareness of how to deal with what they are what they are experiencing. And the last point, most importantly, we also feel challenged. Sometimes we say, I don't know what we are feeling. Sometimes we say, I can't put to words, or it's just all mixed up and I don't know exactly what it is, whether I'm angry or whether I'm hurt, whether I'm upset. It's a mix of many emotions. So we have to be gentle, we have to be patient, we have to be very, very um, careful and sensitive enough when we meet such individuals. Not all of them will be like this. I'm not meaning to say everybody would be vulnerable, but a large majority of them who are currently in the midst of this struggle would definitely be going through something like this. And then occasionally we also meet people who are very resilient, who are very much capable of handling things. They may, they manage whatever comes their way, and they may be very happy and cooperative to meet you. And that could be a nice experience on the other hand. So, we as people reaching out, how do we develop an empathetic approach? The first thing, of course, and the focus of our talk here is to be a good listener. Everything begins by first listening, because you're trying to establish some kind of a relation and some kind of conversation with another person who is a complete stranger to you. Reflect back. Now, reflect back means what? It's a term sometimes we use in counseling also. Reflection means what? If you go to the mirror and you see yourself and you get a reflection of it. It's the same thing, but the mirror is reflecting how you look. It's giving you feedback on, even if you feel good, it will reflect. If you feel bad, it will reflect. If you think that you're looking good, the mirror will also show you a similar, and you'll feel confident. So reflection is something where when you meet a person, um, try to adjust your mood, your demeanor, your approach according to how they are feeling. Now, if they're really upset, you can't be all strict and say, okay, now I just need this information, or you can't be very cheerful and keep joking around with whoever you have gone or with your team. We've got to be sensitive and reflect what they need at that moment. The other part of reflection would be um, to understand what they are trying to tell us. So when they share something emotionally, you can reflect back by just being understanding, by just not judging them, or by avoiding that immediate, let me give you advice, let me judge you on this, or let me tell you this was the wrong way to deal with it. No. So reflecting back can happen in many levels. And in some of the later slides also, we will see how we could do that. Validate their experience. Now, when we say validate experience, what we mean is, say, for example, you call up a friend and you say, I'm feeling very hurt today. Something happened. Some teacher scolded me in college and I'm very upset. So that friend starts telling you, what did you do? I told you not to talk like this. I told you you should be like this. And you get angry and say, but I'm telling you, this is how I feel. Why can't you just listen to me? Right? That happens many times. Sometimes people want to reach out, and which is the case mostly when we go out in the community to meet them. They also know that maybe there is no immediate solution and they have to go through it, but they are looking mainly for validation. They are looking mainly that you understand them and you say, yes, it is understandable that you are going through this. Maybe somebody else in your situation would be facing a similar kind of an emotion, or they would also feel as helpless as you are right now. Anything, it can be whatever that they are sharing. Validate that without putting your views, or without saying, yes, you told me this, even I have felt the same thing, or even somebody else said the same thing. Sometimes that is our intention to make them feel that we are understanding them properly. But let us not disrupt, and let us give them that time and the attention that they need at this point in time. Okay, because validation sometimes is half the problem solved. Even in counseling, many people, they just need someone to listen to them, to validate what they are feeling, and that's all. Now, there is a caution here that we say validation is necessary, but you should not enable it. So, if somebody is saying, okay, I'm always drinking alcohol, because I cannot, because I'm not earning money and I am getting tensed about it. You cannot always say, yes, yes, it is understandable. You've got to help them out of that problem, right? You can point it out in which ways that it is affecting them by understanding what they are saying. So they may say something like, my family doesn't like me, or they are upset, or they can say something like, I'm trying to get a job, but the employers are not taking me because of my drinking. So that's how we try to uh, offer help, but not when they are actually venting out and saying something. Okay, so this venting out part is crucial, and we should not enable dysfunctional behaviors at any time, because then we have a responsibility and not just going on telling them you're doing the right thing. Okay, so initially we should avoid. Ask them what would be most helpful. Like I said earlier also, sometimes we don't know, we will start telling 100 things, then they'll say, no, actually I didn't want all this, I just want if you can get me some groceries from the shop and come, but just buy me this, or just can you give this message to my somebody. Many times that happens, right? They'll say, okay, I don't have a phone, or I don't have some means to contact, can you just do this for me? So ask them what it is that you could do, and have some boundaries. Of course, you can't overextend yourself. That's another point I've mentioned later on. But it's good to ask them what would they need, or what is it that they require at that moment. Help them to examine their situation objectively. Now, what do I mean objectively? When they are examining their situation personally, and when they are examining their situation with all those emotions and whatever has happened, they are unable to think about what they can do next, or they just feel like they are the only people who are struggling. Sometimes a lot of people ask this question, right? Why did this happen to me? Why only me? What have I done? These kind of questions arise, and especially in the health field we find this so relevant, that people think, why, what have and things like COVID or cancer and other illnesses, we don't know exactly how and what is happening. Every day there are different ways of understanding. One day they say it is by touching the surface, another day they say it is in the air. So all these different reasons, okay, can be there, and therefore they may personalize it or look at it very subjectively. Okay, so it's important for us to help them examine things and say, okay, see, this is what is happening, this is what is going on around, and help them to see what are the ways in which they are actually coping up well, instead of always feeling that they are very helpless or something like that. So this will happen gradually as you meet them, or you can gather such information with them. Help them make smart goals. If they say they want to do something, or if you refer them further, or you want to work more closely with one particular group, help them to make. Now, what are these smart goals? I'm sure you all know what are smart goals, like specific, measurable. Okay, you can look up on the internet also. We always talk about smart goals. They should be time bound. The reason we say that is, now if you say my goal is to give up alcohol, or my goal is to become healthy, it will not happen overnight. It will take time, it will take few days and some effort for those habits to change. So the goals have to be clearly defined in a step by step manner, so that you can measure it whenever you attain a small part of it. Okay, it should be realistic, it should be within a time frame. You can't just say I want to be this, but when, by how long? That's how we can plan, right? Even in organizations, or even for your NSS, I'm sure you will have your own monthly or weekly annual plans, like by this date we have to achieve this goal, or this project is there, this is how we are going to respond, and all of that. So making smart goals, helping them to do that, will make them feel that you are working along with them, you are collaborating with them. So all these things, directly or indirectly, will convey an empathetic approach, where you understand their situation, you can relate with them, you know what they are going through. At least you can make a judgment that yes, it must be so difficult, and make them to feel comfortable. Now, one thing we sometimes get asked is, oh, how would you know? You are not struggling, you have not lost anybody, you look fine, you are not affected. But we can always say that, yes, I can imagine how difficult it must be. That is one way of communicating, because we can't always know everything, isn't it? Even in counseling field, sometimes they'll ask, oh, so how will you treat somebody? You don't seem to have the experience for that or whatever. So it's not that we have to have all the illnesses and then only experience it ourselves and learn how to deal with it. We can at least make an estimate by looking at common things around us, by looking at more people who share. And so that has to be conveyed to them directly. How to be an empathetic listener. So in continuation with what we said in general skills, when we say that we have to listen empathetically, what can be done? There are two ways in which I have just, classified some of the factors which are involved, and we look at them one by one. The conversation dynamics. Now you're going to meet somebody, you're going to have a conversation with them, even if it is for 5 minutes, or even if it is a prolonged engagement, or if you're working in a setting where, maybe a hospital or some other NGO where you're directly meeting with people regularly, the setting matters. So whether it is a place where you can get 5 or 10 minutes quiet without others involved, or whether it is, a lot of people, like in a very, uh, you know, busy hospital center, you may have that difficulty, like you won't get that time, or there'll be too much of noise or too much of distraction, or it's not comfortable, or it's very hot, or whatever it is. There are many factors which could affect the conversation. How do you start a conversation? Normally in counseling, we would say rapport building rapport. Uh, how do we do that? By just asking the person, especially on these days, whenever we speak to anybody, first it's important to inquire, are you okay? Because even like, from our center also, sometimes when we call people and ask, can you do this training or can we do that? Many of them are affected with COVID themselves in this time, or they have been affected by losing their loved ones. So we cannot ask them at that point directly. We'll need to find out first, what is it? How do you feel? Or are you comfortable? Did you have your food? Or whatever small things that you can talk based on the setting. Following through the conversation. That is, now once they start sharing, one extreme is that they don't share much and you have to keep on asking probing questions. Or the other extreme is that they will go on asking, talking so much that you will have to ask them to stop. You will have to ask them to, you won't know how to tell them to stop sharing, or they may go on crying or go on telling something one after the other, and you won't know how to break that. So these are some things we'll talk about, how to use transitions, how to move from one topic to another. Okay. And how do you end? On what note do you end? And if there's any need for follow up, how would you do that? Now, this is just general, any conversation, whether it's a counseling setting, any other setting of service, and some kind of health setting, this would apply. Now, as volunteers, as how when you go out, how prepared we are, even for those which are unexpected, how prepared we are. Do we have any kind of interview guide? What kind of skills are we having? Okay, now when I say interview guide, it need not be very elaborate, like something you would do for a research and all that, but you can still have an idea or beforehand know that, okay, these are the common questions that you wanted to address, or the information which you want to get, and how you're going to ask it. Our non-verbal behavior plays a role. So it's not just the questions or the language part of it or the conversation. Now, our non-verbal behavior also matters. For example, we say in counseling, we call it as attending behaviors. Okay. It's basically to make eye contact. Now, when I say eye contact, sometimes even when we train our students, they become very conscious that, okay, I have to make eye contact. So they'll go on staring at the person. Now, that may not be a very feasible thing, right? We cannot always stare without blinking. It may make the person more intimidated, or we may get very conscious that we have to appear correct and we have to say like this and say like that. I will unmute. I think the noise is there from the other, right? It's fine. It's okay. Yeah, so the focus should not be totally on how do I come across as an interviewer. We need to train, we need to slowly practice this. And that's why for people like us in this field of service, right, we need to have this as a demeanor itself. Even generally, when we speak to people, we must be aware of these things. It should be a part of our life. Then only it becomes natural to us and we would be more genuine. Okay. So non-verbal behavior like making eye contact. Now, supposing if you're talking to me and I'm sitting and looking this way, or I'm constantly looking at my phone, or I am, looking at the surroundings, whatever is happening, it's not going to be helpful because the person thinks that what they're saying is not important. Okay. Or if you are getting distracted with your other team members or saying, wait, I have to check this, you keep on interrupting them. They start sharing something and they say, 1 minute, 1 minute, I forgot something else, or wait, I will come back. It may not give a good impression first, and also it will not invite them to uh, share more openly, to connect with you, to feel that you are a trustworthy person, to feel that you are caring, which is what we are ultimately trying to aim at. We want somebody to feel that they are cared for by our approach. Okay, so non-verbal communication, part of it is part of the entire interaction and a very important, crucial thing. Now, this is again a common thing we speak about, but it's good to keep in mind when we are talking about actively listening to someone, and not just non-verbal, many things. Okay. um, Starting with, in the next slide I'll talk about the full form of this abbreviation: paraphrasing, asking questions, meaning and reflection, empathy, and then leads to action. So this pyramid is telling us how uh, body language, each one after the other are playing a very big role in the overall interaction, in the overall uh, intent of us to convey that we are actively involved in whatever they are sharing. We are actively involved in wanting to reach out, in wanting to help. So paraphrasing is something like, for example, if I'm telling you, okay, um, I am living alone at my home and my family members are away. I'm feeling scared at night, and my friends also got COVID, and there are no facilities here. I cannot immediately leave my town and go home. I'm saying all these things. Now you are hearing it. Now paraphrasing and reflecting back or summarizing it would be something like, yeah, I hear that this is difficult, or you're feeling lonely. What exactly is it that you got from them? So one way is they will feel that you understood them. Second thing is, you will be sure that you got the information in the right way, you have not misinterpreted anything. So using these kind of conversational skills, communication skills, are very important, not just for counseling but any kind of helping profession. Asking questions to clarify, not in an intrusive manner. Sometimes we get into that mode of investigation. We don't have to do that. When we ask questions, you can ask to clarify, okay, you shared this, can you tell me a little bit more, or I did not understand what you meant by this, or did you mean like this, can you clarify that for me? That's a more polite way of asking, instead of saying, no, who's there in your family, why did this happen, when did this happen. The way in which we interrogate should not make them feel that we are intruding. Instead, they should feel that we are interested in knowing about them, and so it makes it more inviting, it makes it more collaborative. Okay. Now, meaning and reflection. Meaning and reflection can happen at two levels. One is, what is the content? Okay, what is the content, the data, the facts, the information that they are sharing? The other one is the emotion. What do you see them? Are they saying it with anger? Are they saying it with fear? Are they saying it with happiness? Are they saying it with a sense of hopelessness? What exactly are you getting from the conversation, from your interaction? So when you observe them also, it's important not just to see the verbal, the words, but also see their body language. And often you can come to know, even just by looking at a person, you will know that they seem very sad or very dejected, or they feel very upbeat and very good. So the body language, the meaning behind what is being shared, and how you reflect that back to them is also important. So only when we are able to do some of these things, we will have an empathetic approach to whatever action has been taken or planned or anything like that. So coming to this solar model, simple, like attending skills and all what I said, it's an easy way for us to remember what to do. Sitting at a comfortable angle and distance. Now, normally they'd say don't directly confront the person. Sitting next to them may seem a little less confrontative, makes them more comfortable. open posture and legs which are uncrossed. So if you sit with your arms folded like this or sit away, or it's conveying a sense of closedness from your end, so the person doesn't feel comfortable or invited enough to share something, to talk something. Leaning forward from time to time, looking genuinely interested and listening attentively. So how would you know that, like if somebody was talking, sorry, you were talking to somebody, okay, you were talking to somebody and you are trying to get whether they understood what you're saying or not. What would you look for in their behavior? Maybe they would nod. Maybe sometimes they would smile suddenly and you'll wonder, oh, did I say something which is not correct? Or, is that something funny? Commonly, that's the immediate reaction we have. Or if they don't nod, we are looking, no, don't you think this is correct? No, I felt like this, that's why I got angry and I slapped this person. And you're looking at the guy to see what's the reaction, and they're just looking at you like this, so you feel like, oh, they are judging me, or they are not, or they thought that I'm a very bad person, whatever it is. So the behavior that we display to a person when they are sharing, and particularly when they are sharing a very emotional topic, the struggles, the difficulties, it's not easy. First of all, you can even compliment them that they had so much courage to share it openly with you, because it's not easy talking about your emotions, talking about your weaknesses, talking about your struggles. So at that time, we should give them their full attention. Okay, and ensure that there are very less, I'll talk about it, disruptions and all that. So looking genuinely interested, not simply that, okay, now I'm supposed to sit like this, so let me sit like this and ask what is it that you want, or let me just go on nodding my head. That can also be distracting, because for everything, if you keep doing this, then they also don't know when to stop. The cues we are getting from each other is not correct. So these things need to be practiced sometimes, or not just practiced. Maybe you can take in counseling training, sometimes we do that. We will ask the person to take a video of them doing some kind of conversation or interacting, and then observe, how was my body language? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? This, long term, I'm saying, but it's helpful in this kind of profession. It's helpful to be aware how we come across, and to do the right thing. Effective eye contact without staring, as I told you, and then remain relaxed. Now, even if they are getting tensed and you also start getting all worked up and hyper, it will not serve the purpose. Both of you will be very, agitated or scared, or it's not going to lead to any kind of solution. So it's important to remain relaxed, to keep telling them and reassuring that, okay, we will find some way, even though it's something new to you and you don't know how to react, it's fine. We will find out, we will explore a way, we will find some other resources, we'll find some support. It can be worked out together. This is the kind of reassurance you can give them. And sometimes you're also giving yourself that it's okay, it's fine. Even though I cannot deal with it immediately, I will find a way. So coming to the key skills more specifically, that was broadly and, in general, um, observation. What is the content they're telling? Okay. So they may just share some factual data, some details about what is the situation, who are involved, what happened. So the what part of it. How did it happen? How did they react? How did they perceive it? How was it affecting them? That's the how, the process of it. So when we observe that through our interaction in small ways, also we can definitely do it. It helps us to reflect. It helps us to understand what was the meaning. Okay, by paraphrasing, by summarizing, by clarifying what we have understood from them. This will in turn convey something which is genuine from our end. So when we say genuine, what do we say? Like now, for example, if you go to the shop and say, I'm buying something, oh, this is genuine leather, we will say. That means it's authentic. It is of good quality. It is a verified product. So genuine, when we go out to meet people, it should come across to them that you are really interested in understanding them, in helping them, or in reaching out in whatever way is possible. So genuineness, the intent should be made clear. When you meet them itself, you can ask them, how are you? We are here. We wanted to find out what is happening. We wanted to know how we can reach out to you, or we are working with this organization. We are trying to work like this. We are trying to support like this. We have been talking to people. We are here to understand you better. We are here to join hands and work with you in this tough time. Somewhere that has to come across when you interact and when the way you comfort them. Okay, uh, the intent, and having a non-judgmental attitude. Very difficult. See, as we are talking also, for example, or as you're talking in a friends group also, just normal conversation, somebody will say, oh, you know, this person, they came to college and they were wearing a dress like this, or they were eating this type of food or whatever, and the person's listening will make a face like this, or they will laugh, or they will smirk. Now that means what? We have judged that, we have said that it is, we are disapproving of it, or we find it not acceptable, or whatever it is, right? So especially in counseling, we cannot do that. Now if somebody is coming and telling us, no, I have a habit of you know, breaking things in my home, and abusing my family members, it is wrong, no doubt. It may not go with your value system, but you cannot judge that immediately and say, okay, now you are like this, I can't talk to you. You've got to listen to them for their experience of it and work it out. There's some reason why they have come to you, or why they are sharing this with you. Many times with health especially, there will be a guilt. I did not do this. So if you go and talk to them and they say, I'm not wearing my mask, or I got this COVID because I was not taking precautions. So you can't get angry with them and say, how can you be like this? How can you be irresponsible? And because of this, you, that is our judgment, right? We should avoid it. Only then we will be able to understand them and empathize with them. Empathy comes from that. But there is a caution. You cannot encourage something which is wrong. You can make them to understand, bring them that insight gradually. But to have a non-judgmental attitude means they feel accepted. Or if you are familiar with, I think, Carl Rogers' work, Unconditional Positive Regard, you may have learned about his theories, humanistic school theories and all that. They talk about this. Even like for small children, no, they make mistakes. We say, it's okay, it's fine, come, we will help you to rectify that, or we will help you to change that. There is no judgment immediately, or there is no dismissal, and there is no disapproval. So it encourages a person to talk, and it gives them an opportunity to make a new beginning, which is what we should aim to. So that brings about acceptance. Generally, other skills, we should be focused and specific about what we want. Now, if you know that you're going to talk to them only about their COVID related behaviors, then stick to that. How do you say that? In the beginning itself, make it clear to them that I'm only here to talk about this. I have only this much of time. That's also a good way to say, instead of interrupting them once they start talking and explaining some 100 things to you. It won't be, it would be disrespectful if you tell them, okay, now I don't have time, I will come back later. You know, make it focused, make it specific, inform them your intention, inform them your time, and then begin a conversation. Now, note taking, this is a tricky area. It's not necessary that, you know, always we will take notes when we interact, but sometimes we may want to note down few information, few important things. And this is more relevant for counseling, but I'm trying to relate it with how you would work in the field. You may have some kind of paper or pencil with you to note down what are the minimum information. And it is good to ask them, is it okay? Can I ask you these questions? If it is not too personal, can you share this with me? And as you are sharing, can I just note down a few things? This will be kept confidential, or I will not reveal your name, or it does not mean that I'm not listening to you, I'm looking at the book, or you know, whatever it is. So these are few precautions to keep in mind to convey a genuine intent to understand them, and to also be respectful, so that they don't feel that you're just come there to collect some information and you have gone. Okay, so there's a delicate balance in how we do that. Now, once you get the information, how do you interpret it? How do you consolidate it? Do you check back with them? Do you convey that, yes, it is something that I understood correctly, or maybe I will contact you once again because I did not understand this, or maybe we will get back, since you mentioned you wanted support, we will get back to you on this, or whatever it may be. How do you consolidate? How do you bring it all together? How do you report that information with sensitivity? All that is important. Then we are talking mostly now meeting individuals. But supposing you're meeting a group of individuals, a bigger group of people, say in a hospital, or say in the OPD, somebody, you know, you're just going around to talk to them, or they're waiting for their vaccination, you're going around, or those who have been affected and displaced, you're talking to them in a smaller setting. There, the dynamics would be slightly different. So for you to go out and interact, you need some more skills or some more awareness when you meet a group. So first thing is to think whether the group are known to each other, whether they are related to each other, um, whether the questions you're going to ask are too personal. Okay, some people won't feel comfortable sharing when there are some three people sitting next to them, or it may instigate them that, oh, they said this, let me respond. It may cause more of an argument or more of a competition among the group members. Then the time and the sensitivity, whether it's a topic that can be talked in a group. So if you're asking something like what are the community measures or how comfortable you feel in this locality, then it's okay to talk to few people, or grievances, what are the things. But if you're going to ask like how are you coping up with some loss, or something very personal for them emotionally, they may not feel comfortable opening up at all times. Okay, though there are few who gain support by saying no problem, we are all in this together. So that's for you to decide how is it the group dynamic, and then approach in the most sensitive and the most respectful way. Avoid taking sides, avoid saying that yes, I agree with you or not with you. These are some simple things we should keep in mind when we interact, because it can derail the whole interview or the whole interaction, and it can also cause difficulties among the group members itself. Asking questions. So we are reaching towards the end. Okay, I hope if you want me to stop and ask some questions first before we proceed, or shall I go on? No problem, ma'am. It's been a while. No problem. No? Okay. So asking questions empathetically. We talk about framing our questions in an open-ended manner, in a respectful manner. So what do you mean by open-ended questions? Okay. So if I ask you something like, how are you today? I'm fine. That's a very limited way only I can answer. Okay, unless I am the one who likes to talk and explain so much in detail how exactly I'm fine. But if you ask something like, how have you been coping up with the loss of your relative? Then there would be more scope for them to talk, for them to share, for them to open up. So normally when we say questions, the question can be the main theme or the subject that you wanted to ask or identify. Along with it, we have probes. Okay, we can see that in some time. The probes. Probes are nothing but short things that will help them to tell more. So you can say, was it difficult at the beginning to accept the loss? Because they're not able to express, or they don't know what exactly to say first. Or can you say, you can say something like, what were you thinking? What was happening to your body, anything like that. Very specifically, if you ask them, if you probe, they would be able to elaborate on a particular topic better. It's just like what we do in the classrooms also, right? If I ask you, tell me the answer of this, and you don't know, and then I say, no, why don't you connect it with this point, or why don't you add like this, or this is the clue. So probes are like small clues or cues you're giving them to elaborate further. And of course, you shouldn't force them. Sometimes you should tell them, if you want, you can think about it on these lines, or generally people have reported like this. But no, don't lead them and ask them, so tell me, how difficult was it for you? Because then you're already assuming that it is difficult for them, isn't it? So when you say, tell me, how was the experience? So open-ended questions should be worded also in such a way that it is simple language, not very complicated, fancy words, long sentences, simple words, simple language, and it should not lead them to say something. Okay. So for example, even in colleges, I may ask my students, you liked my class today, no? When I go and ask them that, what is the expected answer? They will say, yes, ma'am, we liked it. So when I say, was it useful for you? They may say, yes, yes, very useful. So if I simply ask them, what was your experience of the class? Tell me honestly. They would be more open to sharing. Of course, I should not be the type whom they are very scared of, or they want to please, or there are many other factors. But when you're asking questions, what I'm trying to explain here is the leading part of it. Don't put words into their mouth. Don't make them to think in a direction beforehand. Try to keep it open, try to keep it general, and invite them to share more. So even when we talk about, say, using encouragers to speak, okay, so I'm understanding, or can you tell me a little more about it? If I may ask, can you clarify this? Can you explain why did you say this? Can you tell me why this feeling is disturbing you, or why this person's reaction upset you? Whatever it is, you can encourage them, nod your head, sometimes just saying like, mm-hmm, something like that. When we are talking, we just nod, or that's an encourager. We are just indicating or kind of encouraging them to continue sharing whatever. But instead, if we are not encouraging and we're just looking at them like this, like, oh, what are you doing, they would automatically stop saying much, right? So when you ask questions, when you talk to them, these are some things that we can keep in mind. How to navigate between different topics. So navigation between one topic to another would be something like, they're going on and on and on talking about only one thing, and you have some 2 3 things more which you wanted to ask about. Okay, so one way is to, as I said in the beginning itself, tell them, I have this much of time, I would like to know some of the details and experiences around these areas. So it's good to prime them in the beginning itself, so that in between you can say, okay, how about we come back and discuss this in some time. I also wanted to ask you about this, or when I visit you next time, I would ask you more details. Can we also get some information on this? So navigating from one topic to another also needs to be done respectfully, without making them feel that you have cut them short, you don't want to hear them, or they should not feel that it's not important. Okay, so doing that in the right way is important. Terminating and ending. So are you going to meet them only once? Are you going to meet them on a few occasions? uh, are they feeling that you have come there to be there with them at all times? So if you're going to say, okay, this is it, and I'm not going to meet you after this, or I'll come back later, or I don't know, it may make them nervous. So how do you convey that clearly? How do you ensure that they don't become dependent, they don't have unrealistic expectations from you? Um, all that will be determined by the way in which you set the tone for your interaction. How you tell them what are your limitations, or what is the area you're working in, how much time you have, what is it that you are wanting. So that's why in the previous slide, having a very focused, specific approach. Now, these are some common mistakes we should avoid, because especially when we are in training and we are new to doing these kind of things, and more relevant, I think, for students also, we should avoid or be aware of some things. Okay, so appearing too rehearsed, appearing like you have prepared and rehearsed, even to ask hello, how are you, and make a rapport, we sound so like I have rehearsed this some 10 times in the mirror, and I have repeated the same question even before they are answering me, I'm asking something. So it should avoid doing that, because automatically they know that you are either nervous, or you have come with a very fixed mindset, it has to be like this. So try to keep it fluid, try to keep it natural. Practice with your friends. It would be difficult sometimes initially, but practice, especially for people who are not very open, they may not have a good rapport, they are very like stern and not talking to you. It's important to know how you're going to speak with them. Be pleasant, have a smile, but not all the time smiling and giggling. They may feel that you are feeling something what they're sharing is to be laughed at or funny. So that's what I mean by rehearse, but don't be very, you will be natural. Overextending yourself. Now, this is another problem. And it's okay sometimes when you hear people saying emotional things, they are also crying, you also start crying, or you get tears in your eyes. That's okay. But you also start feeling the same and get carried away, and then you say, no, I will do whatever I can to help you out, and I will pay for this, and I will do that. What happens is we are going beyond our boundaries. So we cannot be like that. We cannot overextend to everybody possible. We have to know where our limits are, how much we can do, or within what context we are working for. Because it is a good intention of us that we want to reach out, but it may become too much for us to handle later on. Or you give them too much power and control and too much personal access to you. No problem, you call me anytime. Then they start calling you every day, every night. What would you do? So having some kind of boundary, clarity, or telling them in a professional way that this is my work and I'm here for this time, or this is the way you can contact, those are also things to be kept in mind. Finishing off their sentences. We do that often, right? Now, as I'm talking, if suddenly I'm trying to get a word and I'm not able to say it, you all also would be trying to complete that sentence for me, or in your head you would have already got something, this is what she wants to say. Or if I'm trying to clear my throat because I'm not able to speak and I'm not doing it, you only will start you will start doing that for me. That's a tendency we have. Okay, but we should avoid doing it, because we are interrupting how they are sharing to us. So when they are talking, don't say, yes, 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 so you felt very bad. No, let them complete what they had to say. And then you say, okay, so I see this was difficult, or it made you feel like this, so that you give them their due. Disapproving facial expressions, I already told you, don't do that. Avoid distractions, keep your mobile off, inform people. Now, the last thing here is the self disclosure. How much of it, especially in counseling or any kind of field where we are trying to maintain a professional boundary, it's not always necessary that we give them all the details of who we are. We can tell little bit, yes, I'm a student, or yes, I'm from this organization and this is the work we do. But telling too much details may dilute it, and so they won't see you as that boundary won't be there. Okay. And little bit you can tell to encourage them, to make them feel that yes, you are also somebody who has been through things and they can trust you, but not your story, because it's about them. And don't project. So if supposing you have just lost a person close to you and you're talking to someone who is grieving a death of somebody, you can't start talking how you are feeling about it. You have to let them express what is their experience. So projecting your own things on someone else is a big no, that we have to be aware of as professionals in this field or as volunteers in this field. So be aware or reflect upon, at least think about it at the end of the day after you have engaged with people. What is your cognition? Cognition means your thinking, your reasoning, your way of understanding something. How did you interpret their behavior? Were you having any biases? Were you having any assumptions which you feel, oh, but I thought they will talk to me nicely and they were so angry? What is it that was in your head already which has blocked you, or which is working, which is affecting your interaction, your emotional space? See, we are out there to reach out and learn and hear from everybody, but we cannot become like a sponge, right? Absorbing everything, and finally we are so heavy. Instead, you should be able to clear that space regularly. You process it. Either you talk about it in a group, talk about it to your teachers or your supervisors, or you maybe write about it, so that you clear that space. And again, the next day you are ready to go out and meet the next person, or from one to another when you're going meeting. Try to remove that baggage. Don't carry that baggage along with you. Your awareness of how others perceive you. It's not necessary we should always care how others would see us, but be aware. Do they think I'm very arrogant? Okay, why? What did I do? What can I change to make them feel more comfortable? Simple things like that, okay? Or, the way we dress up and go. Sometimes we are going to meet people who are really struggling and we have decked up and, all. It may make them feel that, oh, this person is not of my type. They would never understand, okay? Using listening as a skill. Now, whatever we said today, whatever we spoke, this is all knowledge based, I'm telling you. But just having the knowledge is not enough, right? Just having knowledge is not enough. Somebody has raised the hand. We'll take questions in some time. Okay, I'm almost done. There's just one more slide. Now, say for example, you know how to ride a bicycle in your head. You know that it has a pedal, it has a brake, you have to balance it, you can keep one leg down, all those things. But unless you sit on it and go, you would not practice that skill, isn't it? So you can't learn it only as a knowledge in your head. You have to use it as a daily skill. Same way, listening, communication, empathy, interaction, anything, these are all skills to be practiced. These are all things we need to understand, we need to use in our day to day life. Only then we can transfer it when we go and interact with people for our work. Concluding thoughts: listen to understand, listen to connect, listen to respond. This we hear often, right? So don't listen because you have to react back, because you have to give an answer. Often we get into arguments like that, right? Oh, you're saying this. No, 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 this is my point. So we are only listening to see what we take there and immediately answer so that we get an upper hand. Whereas having healthy arguments is good. I'm not saying don't argue, don't defend yourself, but we should be sensitive to the context. This is not the place where we have to go and react. This is an area where we are extending a service to reach out, to understand, to help. So we should listen for these particular intentions. And think of times when you really felt validated. You really felt that somebody heard you. You felt that whatever I said, they really listened to me. How did you feel? when you feel good, automatically then you will carry forward that reaction. You will know that yes, it is important for a person to feel heard, to listen to them respectfully. So that's like a chain, right? And so we talk about it usually as a like a golden key for relationships and community. Therefore, being a good listener is very, very important. I would like to end with this quote here. The purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, and to have made some difference that you lived well and others as well. So with this, I would like to say that listening is a very important skill. It's a summary of so many more things like empathy. All of that is embedded, and it's something that will come with practice. So it's important we have the intent to be that way, and it's important we be aware of how we are coming across. Okay, so I wish you all the best, and I must congratulate all of you for your intention for service and the kind of work you are doing. And I wish you all good health and success in whatever you take up. So with that, I will stop and let the moderator take over. Thank you. I'll stop the share, ma'am. Screen share.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your time and experience with us. Your talk seemed to provide much needed help. We hope you can join us again. Now, we'll go ahead and take some questions from the audience. I'm sure Dr. Rekha would be happy to answer them. Just a reminder, please put your questions in the chat box. We have few questions from the participants. The first one is from Sania Shine. Do you think patience in hearing and empathetic listening is both related?
Patience in hearing and empathetic listening is both related. Patience, being patient with someone is a quality that you should have if you are interested to extend that yourself to them. Okay. Now, hearing a message is just like it's registering in my sensory register. I can hear it. My ears are functioning. That is hearing. But what I understand of it, am I able to relate and empathize and say that, yes, if I was in your shoe, I would feel the same way? That's empathy. So in both, you would need it. Sometimes when we say you have to be patient in your hearing, maybe some people go on talking. So we can't say anything to them. Like today, maybe I was going on talking. I said 1 hour and I spoke for 1 hour. Maybe you needed patience to listen through the whole thing and afternoon time. You heard it. But when you're listening to me or when I'm sharing something and you're really listening, you would require, and that is a basis for patience. Okay. I mean, for listening, patience is required. So both are related. And I hope I answered that question. It was not.
So the second one is from Shashank. How can we come out from the stage fear?
Stage fear is okay. It's not directly related to the topic, but I'll still tell you because I work with a lot of students and all. Even for me, personally, when I was in school, I would be very scared to go up, for school assemblies and to read something, read the newspaper. It would be very difficult. Now, one thing is because we feel that either we feel we are not capable, we are not prepared, or we are scared of judgment. We feel that somebody else will think bad about us, somebody else will not accept us, somebody else may laugh, or we are not good enough. These are some of the reasons why it happens. Another reason is we are not being exposed or trained enough in that. So every time you have to go up on the stage, maybe occasionally, you're not used to it. So you are likely to feel that it's unfamiliar to you. So one way to minimize it and make it familiar is to visualize. And it's very effective, not just stage fear, exam fear, any fear. You try to think the situation in your mind, okay? You have to visualize it as if you're actually in that stage, actually on that stage there. Visualize you're walking in confidently with a smile, going up on the stage, and you know what you're going to say. And you remind yourself that it's okay if I make a mistake, nobody is perfect. And then you start speaking. And imagine that you completed the whatever you wanted to say or perform, and everybody was clapping or happy, or at least nobody came and scolded you for it. Imagine a pleasant reaction. And then do this regularly. So what we are doing, actually, the mind in the brain, it is becoming a familiar situation. It's like walking into your house every day. You know the setting, you know the surrounding, you don't get nervous. Same way, when you repeatedly visualize, in a good way, feeling confident. You can minimize that sudden, it's so unfamiliar, so new, so challenging. That kind of feeling will be reduced. So please try that and work on your own self-confidence. Practice, get feedback from others, try to improve. So with time, that will definitely, you can overcome it. There is no way that you will remain like that. It's just about working consistently and it would be fine. Okay. Next question.
Third question is from Yadu Krishnan. Ma'am, some motivational speakers are saying that a person can concentrate on a content only for 20 minutes. Is that correct?
No, it's wrong. Actually, we don't concentrate even for 20 minutes. If you see, like when we teach cognitive psychology and all that, they'll say maximum 7 minutes. Okay. Full concentration with full interest and completely engrossed. After that, we tend to divert little here and there. So there are many factors which will determine it's not just 10 minutes. That 10 minutes is enough for us to, no matter what the content, what the situation, we can pay attention without feeling tired, without feeling the need to do something else. But factors like how interesting it is to you, how relevant it is to you, do you need that information right now? What kind of benefit or value do you see in paying attention to that? Or if you're playing a game, for example, and you're paying attention constantly, you can play a game for more than 1 hour without distracting, because your goal is fixed, that I want to do this or I want to react like this. So many things, and also something which is more attractive, right? That's why even as teachers, even I am a teacher, I tell my students, don't think that I have to come up with all these fancy PPT and all those things to make it attractive to you. You have to pay attention because it's relevant for you, not that I have to entertain you and make it like, oh, please come and attend my class. So attention may vary about all these different types of factors, and generally it is a short span, but depends on what it means to us personally, and how tired we are, how we are feeling in general. All those factors will determine for how long, but you should aim to make it as much as you need. Don't say only 20 minutes, so after that, no, ma'am said after 7 minutes, so don't make that an excuse. You can always train yourself and see the long term reason, so why you are paying attention. Okay.
The fourth question is from Sania Shine. If they aren't open-minded to say the problem, are not ready to open up about the problems, what else can we do for them?
So good question. And I think the last part of your question itself is what you need to do. You can ask them, okay, so I'm here to understand you, but you are not having much to share, or you don't feel comfortable right now. What else can I do for you? That is the way. You cannot force them. You cannot say, you have to tell me. And we can't do that, right? We can't go and say, tell me, otherwise I'm going to arrest you. It won't happen like that. You've got to, or maybe you can ask them if they're not comfortable. Maybe, don't ask them directly, but it may be something like they are scared. You will go and talk about it with others. So you can make them comfortable by saying that this will, it will be kept confidential, or I won't mention your name, or I won't discuss this with others without permission, because those are simple, basic, respectful ways of telling people, I want to know from you, and I'm not going to go and make a joke out of it. I'm not going to go and publish it somewhere. I'm not going to go and talk about it with other people. Okay, especially with sensitive topics. So you can make it comfortable, and still if they say no, it's their choice and we have to respect it. So we can ask them instead, what can be done to help you feel better? Shall I just sit here with you in silence for some time, or shall we just do some activity which will take your mind off? Anything else as an alternative can be offered, whichever you could do, and try that, but never force or make them feel that you are in an authority. Now, sometimes it happens because I'm a doctor, because I'm a teacher, because I'm whatever, we are expected to answer. It should not be that way, the dynamic. Okay.
Fifth question from Shashwat. Any idea about INFJ personality type, ma'am? If yes, then is it a positive personality, ma'am, for a person, or should the people of that personality try to change themselves?
Okay. So all are very interesting questions. This INTJ and the different combinations actually of many personality tests are there. MBTI, I think this one is. There are many different ones. Now, the last part of your question, like, should we change the personality? That is difficult. Because if we could change personality, there won't be any personality disorders. You won't have antisocial personality disorder. You won't have borderline personality disorder and all that. It's very difficult to change some traits which we have, because that's our nature. We may be very introverted. You may be a little shy. You may be a little bit, however, your nature may be, whatever characteristics. The thing that you can change is how adaptable you are to your situation. So if you are in a profession where you have to talk, you have to interact, you have to be less emotional, or you have to be centered around more practical things, or less of the thinking type, like INTJ, T is not mentioned here, but there are different things. Then you have to work on those skills so that in your setup you will be functional. So personality won't be changed, but you can learn skills that make you more functional, that reduce your distress. So if you're very introverted and you daily have to come across some 10 people and talk to them, it's going to make you very upset. So instead of saying I have to change my personality, you can learn skills to minimize that trouble that you go through when you have to meet bigger crowds, or you can just look at it as a work or work around those issues. But personality, we must learn to work around with whatever traits and whatever our nature is. There are some which are core traits and some which are surface traits. So the surface ones are like we go along with, say, if you're in an unfamiliar situation, you're not going to be very friendly. You will just talk minimum. But when you're with your close friends, you will be the most jovial, fun loving, laughing, falling down types. So personality, your core, what it is, that will not change. You have to learn adaptable surface level skills so that you can uh, function with minimal distress and be more effective.
So the sixth one is from Anish. What if we speak to a person and then their story struck us badly and affect us?
So this is another difficulty, because we are all humans after all. We are all feeling and thinking people. We relate, we understand. And these days, even for us, though we may be trained and all that, it's difficult because we are also going through something emotionally along with everybody. Now, that's why I mentioned about the emotional space. In counseling, we call it as supervision and debriefing and all that. But here we are saying you're going out and absorbing all that. What are you doing with it? You can't carry it. You have to process it. You have to understand that you are in this field where you're going to encounter people having difficulties. You are going to encounter people who will tell you very difficult stories sometimes. And we may feel so sometimes we feel guilty. How can we be so privileged and they are struggling so much? They are suffering so much. Sometimes even right now people tell, oh, thankfully my family hasn't got COVID yet. Especially in Bangalore, the cases are so bad. Okay, now it's better, but in the last 1 month it was very bad. So, like say in my own lane, if people don't have COVID, it's a privilege. So what happens? No, they may feel guilty. Oh, how can I be okay and somebody else not okay? They are struggling so much. I feel bad to go and speak something, like that. So emotionally, we can react in different ways. We can feel guilty. We can feel like we're not doing enough to reach out. We can get affected and keep on thinking about it. We call it as rumination. That will happen with training, with practice, with experience, where you're able to keep that aside and function. So you have to tell yourself that this is your work, this is limited to this time, and you have to process it in some way. Either you write about it, you write down your thoughts, write down your notes, discuss it with your supervisor, overcome it. And it's natural. See, like even the doctors currently, many of them are breaking down on media and everywhere else. You see them crying that we feel helpless, we could not help, people are dying. It's a natural response. It's okay if you're feeling affected, but for a certain time only, because if you're going to remain affected, then you're not going to be able to reach out. So finding that balance is part of your training, part of being in a helping relationship and helping profession. So find ways where you can express it and process it by talking, by writing, by having some kind of group supervision that could help. Maybe just as friends, you talk about it. Anything like that generally helps people who face such issues.
Seventh one is from Joshel. What are some of the triggers we should be aware of to avoid while trying to speaking to the person?
So triggers can be two. One is your own triggers. One is the triggers for them. Okay. So I said, like, for example, if the person, whoever's sharing their story, it's very similar to your own life story. then what happens? You are likely to react as if, so if you are in college and you can't scold back your teacher, and the person who's talking to you saying, my teacher is troubling me so badly, online classes, they're always insulting me, always forcing me to put on the camera. Yes, yes, yes. So even your reaction would be like what you could not tell your teacher, you would tell them back, like, as a, that's a projection, that's a trigger for you. Now for them, for example, the background. That's why in the beginning itself, it's good to get some background information from them, right? Like, what is their situation? So if you know that they have already gone through some difficult experience, or they had lost some of their property or something like that, and you're going to ask them, so how do you feel with the limited resources you have? It may trigger them because they have just been through that. Or you can again ask them and say something like, oh, so you just lost your somebody, sibling, parent, friend. How is it for you? When they have already told you something, so then it becomes like a trigger for them. I just told you, what you want me to explain again? I'm not here for some kind of a media interview. They may get angry like that. So instead, you could word it in such a way that you say, you are mentioning that it was so difficult for you at that time. Can you say something more? Or would you like to share something for others who are in a similar situation like you? So that way you'll get to know about their ideas, but you're not triggering them in a way that they get upset about it. So practice asking people in different ways, practice talking to them for difficult topics, and with experience, slowly with time, we all learn these kind of things. It will require a little bit of engaging actually with people. You can also look at so many sample interview things, even on YouTube, Google, and all. There are so many links training you how to ask sensitively, how to do, or we can also do some workshops, or we can do a supervision if you like. So there are many ways where you become aware and then you try to modify. The next
Great question from Jasir. In the world of modern technology, isn't it the time for thinking about more ways of listening, as people don't talk in person often like they used to?
very good question again. In fact, that was one of my points. I don't know if I mentioned it correctly. We are in a world of digital information and sometimes communication overload, but the balance is little bit not correct. There's a lot of sharing, but there's less of listening, understanding. So everybody wants to put out their perspective, everyone wants to say something, everyone has an opinion, but are we understanding what it is? Are we listening and giving and receiving equally? That has become a challenge. And like you said, in today's context, say for example, right now in my own college and also in Samagra, we have offered something called as tech-based counseling. That means counseling in any kind of technology, like emails or chat-based, phone call, telephone, and all that. Why we are saying that? Because somewhere, like even now, for me to engage with you, we are how many, maybe around 200 people are there. I'm only looking at the screen, right? I can't see anybody. I don't know who is the person asking this question. That's a challenge. And that is what you're saying in this digital world. So how do I interact then? I can only ask you, are you okay? Do you want a break? Or sometimes in my smaller classes, I'll ask them, just raise your hand on the group so that I know you're listening. I know you're, following. So we have to find, like you told, alternate ways, or we have to adapt. So now, when example, if I'm talking to somebody, we do online counseling. We see a lot of clients these days through our Samagra helpline. I cannot see their facial expressions. I can hear them. So how do I gauge? But normally I'll get a lot of valuable information by looking at them, just by seeing their nonverbal. Here I can't see it. But in some ways, it's actually encouraging them because they feel like I'm anonymous. I can just speak freely without having someone observing me. There are advantages, there are disadvantages. What we need to do is adapt and see how best you're achieving your goal. Are you able to get to that shared understanding, like what I started with? Okay, so we do have to be creative, or we have to think out of the box. We have to learn new skills, adapt, but we need to know that everything can't be the same in every context. So in the digital world, the context of communicating will be different, but still we need to follow some basic things of respect, confidentiality, asking things, coming to confidentiality, maybe if you're asking someone to share over text or email, they may be scared that it's going to be documented there. Okay, and these days with all kinds of things, you can record, you can everything, that could be a challenge. So making them feel that it's not going to be done or it's not going to be shared, that would be one way for you to adapt. Okay.
We'll take up one more question as a time's up. The question is from Srisha. What if we are trying to say something to a person, but he or she understand it in a different way? And what if they feel bad? What to do then?
So the thing is to try and gain a shared understanding. Here, the simple thing is misunderstanding. That means your perspective, your intent was not conveyed in a way that they could understand. Either because now, for example, if I'm talking to you guys as college students, I would speak in a particular way. But if I'm talking to the children about the same thing, I won't sit and talk like this for 1 hour thinking, okay, they will see the slides, they will learn, they will listen. Definitely they'll not. They will need a different approach. Likewise, if you're talking to somebody who has a different perspective or different view, sometimes even, for you guys, your age, you would say, oh, generation gap, my parents don't understand. They are always shouting at me. That's a gap somewhere because so for example, if I wear this, now everything looks magnified. Or if it's a colored one, everything will look dark, everything will look red or whatever the color lens is. What you are wearing may be different. So the way we are viewing things, the way we are, our perspective, what is our already preconceived ideas we have, what are the biases we have, will affect. So if there is a miscommunication, you've got to address what is the reason for it. Okay, you can ask them once again, see, my intention was to communicate like this, but I think this got missed out. Can we talk about it at another time? If they are angry and they're upset and all, tell them, I would really want to clarify this, but can we do this after a few minutes? Or I'll go for a break and come back. I would really like to clarify because you are important to me, or because I do not want to leave this in a way you are feeling bad. I would like to clarify and help you understand me better. Maybe my way of communicating had some issue. I will try to tell it in a better way. This is the way you can convey your intent, and that's all. If the person's still not understanding, we cannot change some people. That will have to be left at that much. Unless you know them well and you have more opportunity to understand each other better. With such things, you can make your intention that I want to clarify, and then make an attempt again when the emotions are not high.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering all the questions. Is there anything else you wanted to tell before a wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say that it's so nice to see so many of you interested here in the work that you all are doing and all that. I know it's not easy, like someone said, no, attention span will be less and all, but these are relevant things in the context that you're working in currently. So I'm hoping that even few of you could have benefited from it, and I'm open to interacting again at any time in any way we can work together. We are definitely open to it, and I think already ma'am has my contact, and we can work together more. It was a good experience. I really liked your questions also, and anything for the cause of mental health. I feel we are all doing something important because that's something neglected. So as much as possible we should talk about it, create awareness, and empower everybody. So all of us should know, like, not just COVID, okay, physical health, we should know how to be mentally stable also. So please be the cheerleaders for this cause, and wish you all the best. Please stay safe. My wishes and my prayers to all of you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you once again, ma'am.